Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have a very special guest, Chris McKenna of Protect Young Eyes. Chris, hi. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Nikki. My pleasure. This is going to be fun.
Yes. And so, Chris, I want to get to some tips for parents today because the audience here at Scrolling to Death are parents. But first, can you tell me about your journey? So I want to know what led you to create Protect Young Eyes and really dive deeper into creating safer digital spaces.
I'm not supposed to be doing this, Nikki. I don't know about you, but this isn't what I intended or even have a degree to be doing. So I have a degree in accounting. I was supposed to be a partner at Ernst & Young by now. I was in consulting for 12 years. I did that until 2009, but then I went into full-time ministry and I led a large junior high ministry here in West Michigan from 2009 to 2016. Now I'm going to come back to that because that's important, but I was also a young child who was exposed to pornography, which then led to a very unhealthy relationship with pornography in my adult years, compulsive use. So then that was something I kicked to the curb, something I worked on with an accountability group, Covenant Eyes and software and all of that. And then I get into full-time ministry. And if you think about the time frame from 2009 to 2016, that's when we put the internet in the pockets of children for the first time in human history. And that terrified me, that we put the very snake in the pocket of our children that almost destroyed my life. And in the beginning, I mean, we think social media is bad now, which it is, but in the beginning, it was the wild, wild west. The early days of Instagram were straight up pornography, video, like straight up porn that you could watch, video content like you would find on Pornhub today, right up on Instagram all the time, right? And the Discover News section of Snapchat was rife with all kinds of over-sexualized content, right? We're the ones that called them out in the early days of the Cosmo After Dark and that kind of stuff. So it started off as a small Facebook group, just wanting to educate parents. And then it led to a website being launched in 2015. And I never expected to be doing talks, but then schools started coming to us, asking for us to present. And that's led to hundreds of presentations that we do now all over the country. So that's the journey. It's something I'm now doing full time. That's really fairly recent. I know people could be listening to this at all different points or watching this video at different points, depending on when that is in the future. But I'm only 6 months into doing this full time. Before that, it was something just on the side that now it's become very clear that it needs my full-time attention. So here we are.
Yeah, amazing. I think I'm right there with you, about almost 6 months of full-time. I was still trying to disconnect from income for now, you know.
Exactly. Understood.
Okay, thank you for that background. That's really helpful. And I often hear a lot of general recommendations like delay smartphones or make sure you communicate with your kids. But parents have very specific situations that they're working through and they need help. So I thought today we could start by going through some scenarios related to like giving your child a device. And then you can give me some advice on ideally what that would look like. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay.
It sounds like I'm about to dive into what I see in our Instagram DMs every single day, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, because I get so many parents contacting me saying, asking for specific advice, and I'm not an expert, but I do have access to experts, and so this is where it's helpful to get these questions answered. So let's say I'm a parent of like a 10 or 11-year-old, and my child is going to start walking to school alone, and I want to keep him safe, and I would like him to have a device on him. What does the ideal world look like for that transition?
Well, my hope is that as a 10-year-old, there have already been some exposures to what it means to use something that's connected to the rest of the world, right? So I would say even a 10-year-old, right? There's devices we could talk about, whether it's the Bark phone or Gab devices that I know you've spoken to their leadership, great organizations. But I don't even want that to be like the very first thing. There's a progression here. And that's even how we approach our school talks, K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. There's a right kid, right tech at the right time. So even for that 10-year-old, and we say delay is the way, we've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah.
But delay is the way is a slow tech strategy, not a no tech strategy. I want kids, even if you've said no, one of the things we say in our talks is even if you've said no, whether it's to apps or social media or certain digital spaces, you have to educate your child as if you've said yes. because we don't control all of the digital doorways. We don't control all of the humans that they come into contact with. We don't control all of the networks and the access points and all the devices that are out there. And so my hope is that by the time you get to that spot where your 10-year-old is hopping on a bike like mine and riding up to the speedway to get a Mountain Dew slushie and hopefully bring one back for dad, and you slap that Gab watch on your son, that's just another example to him of something that has great power, that's connected, and that you have to use responsibly. Because maybe he or she has had an Alexa in their room and knows that that's connected to the internet, but it doesn't have a screen, but I can call up songs and those sorts of things. So I guess the overall message there for parents is think of it as a continuum, right? Think of it as a process of education, of scaffolding, of coming alongside them. Think of it as a process of, yes, constantly bathing them in conversation about the tech that you're giving them, and make sure they always understand the why. If they're going to walk somewhere and you want to give them a device, explain why you're giving them this device. This device has a specific purpose. Why? Because I want to stay connected to you, and this is how you use it. So always explaining that why behind it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more going on than just giving your child a device and making sure that there are things that are happening before that so that they understand kind of where it fits into this big picture.
Yeah, I love that. And I like your quote, we don't control all the digital doorways. And you may say no to devices at younger ages, but they're going to get access through their school device, or they're going to see their friend's device, or they're going to be accessing these devices whether or not we allow them to. So the communication part, right?
Right. So you're going to give them that device, but that's just another example of something that they've been hearing for years. One of our 5 core values at Protect Young Eyes, the very first one is to model the right behaviors. And a component of modeling is co-play, shoulder-to-shoulder technology activities with your children. I don't know why young kids like to watch other kids unwrap toys on YouTube. I think it's mind-numbing, but if that's what your child is into, then that's what you're into too. It's shoulder to shoulder. It's with them. It's alongside them, especially if you have young boys who shoulder to shoulder often open up more than staring at them and saying, how's your day? How are you doing? Right. It's that time working and playing and switch time and playing games with my boys that I have the best conversation. So it's just part of this larger ecosystem of, yes, conversation, but also they know that technology exists and they know what devices have what purposes and they know who owns them, that even that Gab phone that you're going to give or that Bark phone or whatever it is that you're going to give your 10-year-old when they're going to venture out, they know that it still belongs to mom and dad. Every single thing that is connected to the world. And I remind my children of that all the time. I know all the websites say we chop off the www, but guess what? It's still there.
Yeah.
And I want to remind my children of that all the time, that even that Gab device, even that kid-friendly device is connected to something that is connected to 100 million people all the time, right? And that's why it belongs to me. If you're a minor in my house, whether it's a kid-friendly device, an iPhone, a Chromebook, whatever it is, it's owned by me, parent-led ownership with everything. And it's just a part of that.
So I assume you would not recommend parents give their children a device for like a Christmas present?
Never.
Okay.
But that's the number one. That's also the number one thing that I say to all the grandparents that come to our presentations. Do not give gifts to your grandchildren that are connected to technology in any way. You give them to the family so they can be used as a part of the family in whatever way mom or dad or caregivers want to. But it is a community device. One of the things we say is technology is always better, whether you're 4, 14, or 40, if it's a we activity instead of a me activity. Always. In community. As a guy who struggled one-on-one with pornography, I can tell you beyond a reasonable doubt that no matter how strong you think you are, eventually the algorithm will figure you out. It may not be porn, but it may be gaming or fantasy football or Candy Crush or shopping or whatever it is. It's going to figure you out because it's smarter than you are. I'm telling you, it's smarter.
And it's more complicated than just like what you're interested in. It knows who you are, your age, your demographic. It knows what your friends like. It's going to start serving you things that you have shown no interest in, but they want to test it and see if you will click on that, right? It's a complicated system with AI involved now. Okay, so now let's say I'm the parent of a 14-year-old and I decide I want to start to let my responsible teenagers start to be able to chat with their friends, maybe have some monitored use. So what would that ideal transition look like? What communications should I be touching on with that teenager?
I would put the ball back in their court to begin with and ask them, what are some of the things that you hope never happen to you while you're in this chat? What are some of the things that you hope you never have to deal with in a DM situation or a group texting situation, and get them to sort of conceptualize some of the things that could go wrong? One of the things that I used to do when I was in Ernst & Young, I worked in large businesses mitigating risk. I was a risk consultant. And so we were always asking the question, what could go wrong? That WGCW was always on all of our work. And that was a constant question that we were asking. And we'd identify all of the what could go wrongs. And then we would come up with ways to mitigate as many of those situations as possible.
Yeah.
And so what I want to have occur when that happens is, one, I want them to connect some of those things to their digital activity, because I think you just get texting and typing and watching and scrolling down a digital path. You don't even realize the things that can happen until you're there and you're like, how did I get here? And you don't realize that you got there, right?
Yeah.
So I want them to think of those things. And then I want them to come up with, well, what would you do in that situation? You're right. That sounds terrifying. That sounds horrible. I would have hated if that would have happened to me as a 14-year-old. What are some things that you might do in that situation? And what I'm trying to do with all of that, Nikki, is I'm trying to create agency. Whenever a young person is involved in the solution, adults are the same way.
Yeah.
But whenever we are a part of the solution, we're almost always more bound to obey whatever it is we want to have happen in that situation. Why? Because you're a part of it, right? Marketers do this all the time when they're launching something. They'll ask people, what do you want me to write? What do you want me to launch? What do you want me to do? And really what they're employing there is a tactic to get people to own a little bit of the outcome, even if they don't really listen to the things that they say, right? They're going to ship something anyway. They're going to write something anyway. They're going to make a video anyway. But it gives you that feeling that you owned it. And so you're just more bought into it. Now, I'm not trying to say that we need to be manipulating our children, although as parents, we sometimes maybe, I'll set that one aside. But you know what I'm trying to get at here is I truly do want them to own this, because I am not going to be there when they're 14, every single click and every tap. So I've got to make sure, and all the things that I'm saying to you, Nikki, this is the number one thing that I say to parents of more, older, kind of teenage internet users. Parents come to me all the time and say, Chris, I don't know how to handle this with my kid. I'm afraid this is going to happen. I'm fearful they're going to do this. And I think this might already be happening. And they type out this whole long DM to me of all of these things that they want advice on how to talk to their kids about.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that I type back to them is, have you read back to them that DM that you just typed to me? Do they know what you're actually afraid of? Have you had an authentic enough conversation just to put your fears and concerns out in the light? Because a couple of things happen when you do that. Number one, it creates a bridge of digital trust. That's a phrase that we use, digital trust building with our kids by being that open and honest. Number two, when you put fears out in the light, they automatically have a whole lot less control over you.
Yeah.
Because you have voiced them, you've put it out there. Right? And number three, what might happen, and this is an awesome outcome, is your kid may say to you, okay, Mom, I would never do that. That is so dumb. I would never do that. And you would look at them and go, okay, you're right. That was so silly of me to think that. You are awesome and amazing. And it's this bridge that gets built between. And again, that's giving them a little bit of ownership to go, okay, I would never do that. And all of those things all come from us as parents. And this is something we say, is tell them everything that you're afraid of. Our fears make us horrible parents and we make irrational decisions, and they may be unfounded. And that's something that I just want to get out. So twice this week, this week when we're having this conversation, I have responded to an Instagram message with that exact bit of advice.
I love that.
Go back and read what you just typed to me, to your child.
Yeah.
And see if it's actually based in truth or not.
Yeah, because it's not helpful to not talk about it. We hear about suicide. It's like parents will be afraid to bring it up. But the point is, you're not going to make someone suicidal by bringing up, asking them if they feel suicidal. You're going to validate their feelings. So like asking your kid about cyberbullying, it's not going to make it happen. It's going to make them talk to you about it when and if it does happen, because most kids do get cyberbullied. Most kids do have issues. And maybe you'll bring it up and they'll say, yeah, I am experiencing that. And that's, you're in, right, to support them.
And that's how that conversation ends. Mm-hmm. Most of the time what happens is they will say to you that none of that has happened. Mm-hmm. I would never do that. But then as a parent, you have the opportunity to look at them mm-hmm. and maybe with a little quiver in your voice mm-hmm. because you really, really mean it. And I'm serious. And that is, if it ever did, I just want you to know, number one, I will not freak out. Mm-hmm. Number two, I will never change any of the way that I love or feel about you because of something that happens on this device. Mm-hmm. And number three, you can always perpetually mm-hmm. land safely and softly with me if it does.
Yeah. Yep.
And you say that part to them, not only at the end, mm-hmm. Nikki, but so often mm-hmm. that they roll their eyes and finish your sentences because you have said it so frequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are so many roadblocks now that they can run into. I feel like more and more new issues are coming up in addition to cyberbullying and predators and sextortion. And I think it's important for parents to be knowledgeable on these things because a lot of kids are getting affected. And what are kind of the danger areas that you cover when you educate parents about online harms?
Well, there's the list that you just went through. We cover all of those topics. I mentioned pornography earlier. I think that is maybe the number one issue because of where it shows up. Right? It used to be that pornography was in places where only pornography was. Mm-hmm. Like the lines between where porn was and where porn wasn't were pretty bright back in the 1980s when I was, a 14-year-old boy or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's not true anymore. Like it lives in their Chromebook that they're supposed to use for algebra. It lives on their phone that they are on FaceTime with grandma with. Everything that they want to do that's good and productive for their lives also is a house, a digital box where I can see some of the most horrific and illegal content on earth. Like that's a tough spot to grow up in.
Yeah.
So, we talk all about that issue. We educate parents on that issue because it's probably the number one issue that causes parents to freak out and to overreact. But it's also the number one issue where they can't do that because I don't want that to be an issue that is dealt with in secret. Nobody deals with that issue well in secret, especially a tween or a teen boy or girl, right? So all of those issues, and parents can read about all of those issues. To be honest, Nikki, our presentations are less about the issues. Mm-hmm. We could stand up there in front and talk about all the problems. Mm-hmm. But here's what I know about the parents who come to our talks. They're coming because they already know that there's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So different audiences demand different approaches, right? On my website, because it's a colder, more top funnel sort of marketing audience of people who maybe need some convincing, okay, I maybe will share more in terms of the harms and the stats and the data there. Mm-hmm. But for those who end up, say, in our course, or those who end up, say, in our community, or those who end up in one of our parent presentations, I don't need to tell them porn is a problem. Mm-hmm. I don't need to tell them that there are predators. I don't need to share those things. I need to hook them into a framework that whether their child is 4 or 14, they know how to handle those specific issues in a good and positive and productive way. Yeah. Because every child's a little bit different. Every home's a little bit different, every situation. And there's so many variables there that I couldn't possibly cover all of them. Instead, we've created a framework, our core values that I believe work whether your child is in elementary, middle, or high school, or even beyond that, where they can apply principles to their situation and make decisions that help their family. So it's not that I'm not evading your question. I'm just saying
that's
that
okay.
I don't think that most of the parents who show up at protectyoungeyes.com or most of the parents that show up at Scrolling to Death need to be convinced that social media is a problem.
Yeah.
Most of them know that.
Yes.
What they need is now what do I do about it? Because what I get all the time are schools and churches and places that come to us and say, you know what? We had somebody come in and they told us all the problems, but now we don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They stirred the pot. They created a lot of chaos. The broom hit the hornet's nest. And so we're often brought in then as okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now what? What do we do? What are the practical little things that we can do in some of the situations that you described and many, many others?
Mm-hmm.
We specialize in the practical because I'm not a tech person. I don't have a tech degree. I'm not a computer science guy.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a CPA who went into ministry, who has studied and now wants to explain things regardless of your tech IQ.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways that any parent or a grandparent can display their digital superpowers, and we just want to show them how to find them. So that's our focus.
Right. Okay. I want to touch on social media just briefly. So you mentioned delay is the way. Are there any social media sites that you would just avoid in general that are popular today?
Well, the way that it worked with my daughter, who's now 19.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you have to imagine this when she was 14 or 15, TikTok really wasn't even a thing then, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't even on the table. Really, all that was on the table, Be Real didn't even come out till the end of her senior year.
Mm-hmm.
The only two that were really on the table at that point in time that she would even have wanted were Instagram and Snapchat.
Yeah.
So she got her iPhone at 15 and at that point wanted some social media. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, you can't have Snapchat till you're 17. So that leaves one.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was allowed to start an Instagram account at age
Mm-hmm.
15. That was 4 years ago. As an organization, we've since moved up. We would love to wait until 16 for as many parents as possible because the risk and the nature and what we know, right? We've now learned so much more from behind the curtain
Mm-hmm.
in the past 4 years, given all the information that's come to light.
Yes.
But then at 17, she reminded me
Mm-hmm.
after her birthday, she's like, remember, Dad? And so then she was able to get Snapchat. A long-winded answer to your question is, depending on your child,
Mm-hmm.
that's why this is a risk-based decision. Because there are some kids who, because of what they do or don't have in self-worth or what they see when they look in the mirror, that Instagram is just toxic for their soul,
Mm-hmm.
that they simply can't handle the pressures of constantly seeing a millisecond of perfectly polished perfection in everybody else's life.
Yeah. Yep.
There are others who have a dopamine reward loop in their limbic system that is so sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to certain rewards. And I resonate with this because this was part of what fed my issue with pornography, is that TikTok is something that they simply cannot control,
Mm-hmm.
that they will scroll and scroll and scroll.
Yeah.
Snapchat is a little bit of both of those. So
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat's an easy target. I think there are things about Snapchat that are simply incompatible with the teenage brain.
Mm-hmm.
Neurologically, Snapchat is a limbic system supercharged monster
Mm-hmm.
that preys on beautifully designed and amazing curiosities inside of teens who want to connect, who often just want to do things that are risky and curious and exciting. And here's an app that lets photos disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even fair to the teenage brain.
Yeah.
So it depends on the type of harm. In terms of like life-altering harm that happens in an instant,
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat is by far the worst. When you look at the things that can be acquired, be it drugs and some of the horrible stories, that we're both aware of. I know you're communicating with some of those parents, and I have too, right? By far, I think Snapchat is the one that changes teen lives for the worse the fastest.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
But the one that is by far totally underestimated in terms of its slow, corrosive impact on teens,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that is TikTok by a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Its algorithm is like nothing that I don't know about you, have ever experienced,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is the Pied Piper of teen culture, and its algorithm is the flute. And it directs so much teen thinking about this world. As we say, it's just too much, too fast.
Yeah.
But here's where there is so much dissonance when I talk to parents, because they go, well, it's not porn and well, there's not predators. It's just videos. It's the same exact thing that I used to hear back in the early days of Instagram. It's just pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but have you scrolled? Have you created a 13-year-old account? So in terms of, so again, I'm a risk guy, right? That's my upbringing. That's my professional background. As I'm looking at risk and I'm comparing in my background of business to its business risks and its culture. In this case, I'm looking at kids, how they are, how they're wired. And these are the things that we share with parents to say, okay, you can't say you didn't know. I've educated you on what the possibilities are. You know your kid best.
Yeah.
Drop your child into that app and ask yourself, because instead of asking what's the right age for social media, that's the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
I think a better question is, what digital experiences allow my child to have the most fulfilling childhood?
Mm-hmm.
Because I could tell you age 16, which I do. I have to give some number.
Yeah.
But there are 26-year-olds who can't handle social media.
Yes.
So
I think the conversation about risk is the right one. And what are you willing to risk? I've heard too many stories of predation. And that's the big one for me, especially on Snapchat and Instagram. And for me, the risks are way too high unless things change drastically regarding legislation or transparency with these platforms. Let's talk about legislation. So you are involved in a lot of legislation, right? So I see you a lot testifying and things like that. So what's kind of caught your eye recently? Anything that you want to highlight for parents around legislation?
yeah, so there's 3 layers that could be focused on, right? There's what happens internationally, international pressure, federal pressure, and state pressure.
Yeah.
We as a country have so many cultural differences, ideas about the role of government compared to the rest of the world, that we will often not line up with some things that are being passed in other countries, right? I would love to say, let's just slam in the things that the UK is doing around child safe design and other things. And there's some really good elements to it, but
Yeah.
our people won't accept it. They just won't. At the federal level, then, what we have is a Congress that simply can't agree on anything. It's a dumpster fire. I don't know how else to describe it, right? Even something as bipartisan as child sexual abuse material, and trying to erase or punish those who knowingly facilitate the distribution of content that has always been illegal should not be up for question.
No.
Like this should not be a debate. This is legislation. The Earn It Act should have passed years ago to simply remind us of the original intent of CDA 230, which was never to create an immunity shield for illegal content. It was never its intent. As you know, we have COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, which seems to suffer another wound every day, right? Now, yesterday, we have calls to hook TikTok and banning TikTok to it, which is now complicating all kinds of forward movement on what could happen in the House. It hasn't gone to a vote yet in the Senate. It may. If it does, great. That'd be the first time a child protection bill has gone to vote in 25 years. What does that say about us? Right? We haven't passed anything in the United States to protect children since 5 years before MySpace. Are you kidding me?
It's insane.
COPPA, right? I mean, you and I didn't even have any children yet at that time. And yet it's ridiculous. So all of that to say, most of my focus is on the states because they're nimble and because we can get things done.
Yeah.
And we can create enough noise in individual states that hopefully gets the attention of the federal government, that maybe something would happen that way. We can, pass enough legislation that I hope will make a difference. So that's where most of my foundation side, Protecting Eyes, is 2 sides, right? We have what we do in presentations, but we also have a foundation that houses most of our student work, but also the advocacy work that I do.
Great.
And so that's when you see me posting, traveling, testifying, co-authoring legislation with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and organizations like that, just trying to get something passed. We need something to happen at the policy level. I don't want big, fat government. Nobody does.
Right.
But at the same time, whenever industry is causing egregious harm to its citizens, we have to rein it in. Yeah. And that's what policy is intended to do.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you're working on that. And I'm hoping to get more involved as well. I wanted to touch on AI because I saw a LinkedIn post you recently wrote. You said, I'm going to quote it, "We're sitting on a deep fakes time bomb. Global governments have completely underestimated the scale of harm, mostly to women, and the moral bankruptcy of tech companies means they will turn a blind eye unless we hit them in the pocketbook." AI is causing a lot of problems and also a lot of innovation, but you mentioned here, unless we hit them in the pocketbook. What do you mean by that? I was wondering if you could explain that part. Like, what do we need to do to hit big tech in the pocketbook?
Liability, Nikki, is the great restraint to irresponsible business behavior. It always has been. So my experience in business going back to what I used to do at EY, I was brought in after Enron and that debacle into publicly traded companies to help them not become the next Enron. My job was to mitigate financial reporting risks by helping them implement a law that was passed in 2002 called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of accounting stuff because that's not what we're here to talk about. But the point is, Sarbanes-Oxley created personal liability for CEOs and CFOs who signed fraudulent 10K and 10Qs. Those are their quarterly and annual reports as publicly traded companies. Once you put corporate executives on watch for personal liability, guess what hasn't happened since Enron? Another Enron.
Right.
Because now all of a sudden, right now, there's been other failures in business. I'm not saying that it solved everything. But the point is, and this is a part of some of the UK legislation, you have personal liability. So what we say is, unless you make it hurt when these businesses cause harm to children, they'll never change their habits. They won't. There's no incentive for them to change their habits. There must be oppressive financial penalties if certain best business practices, that's a term that we coined with Senator Graham back when I testified back in 2019, parts of the Earn It Act bring this in, that in order to earn certain privileges, in order to earn certain liability protections, you should have certain best business practices in place that protect children. And there should be an audit that goes on related to those best business practices to ensure that you're compliant. And then, only then, based on a favorable audit, do you earn those liability protections. Otherwise, you are fair game.
Right. And COSA will help with that, with like third-party monitoring and more transparency.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely COSA is definitely a step in the right direction, Nikki, because it is creating an accountability cycle that is so important. And that's what's missing. And I know you started kind of this line of thinking with a quote that I had out there about AI. You know, COSA is already 10 years late. Okay. And this is with technologies that are, you know, really archaic when you think about what their counterpart is today with generative AI. Okay. So what we have is a repeated pattern of behavior, or with industry, a pattern here is that we continually roll out new technologies without enough research to know how it impacts the humans that are going to interact with it. I'll be honest, I believe that AI is already beyond our control. I believe that we are going to, years from now, I believe that your children and my children are going to feel the impacts of our sin when it comes to this issue. And to be frank, I'm a little bit terrified of that.
Yeah. I mean, how we're seeing that play out is, I mean, generative AI is being used, like free Nudify apps in the App Store, where kids can take photos of their classmates and throw them in there and make them look naked, realistically naked. And predators using this technology to make children's photos look nude and then perform sexual acts. It's like you don't even know, something you never would have thought anyone would possibly be able to do or want to do is being done already.
Well, and intersect that content with a version of the internet, right? We're in an old version of the internet. There is a distributed version of the internet, Web3, based on blockchain technology that will come eventually. Imagine everything that you just described in permanent form, never, ever erased, because it's preserved in blockchain. You'll never be able to get rid of certain CSAM. Like this is the direction that we are heading.
Scary.
There are humans that will take it in that direction.
Yeah. I'm always reminded, like, you hear about these things happening, you're like, what human being would do this? Because someone's making these decisions, someone's creating these deep fake nude companies that are the app companies. Like, I think I'm just growing up and learning that there are bad people in the world, you know?
There are. There certainly are.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with parents, Chris? What's like going on for you right now that's been really important for you to share with your audience?
It's bigger than social media. And that's what I think I want parents to understand is I think that there is a lot of focus on social media and what it's doing, but there is a lot more to this conversation than that. And those are the parts that I think can sometimes bite parents in their oh, I haven't given my kid TikTok, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or I haven't given my kid Snapchat or Instagram, we're fine.
Yeah.
And they underestimate the smart TV, or they underestimate the burner phone because they don't have their router under control. And so even though their child doesn't have a device with a data plan and they think they don't have a phone,
Mm-hmm.
kids hand around iPhones like candy because we have a sickness in America. We don't throw away anything that's Apple, and we keep the boxes too. So I know none of those devices have SIM cards, but I think these are the blind spots, right? Again, I spend a little less time focusing parents on the harms of social media and more wanting them to not forget some of these other blind spots.
Yeah.
Yes, it's important. I'm going to keep talking about it. But I don't,
Right.
I don't want to forget some of these other places, particularly for our younger kiddos,
Mm-hmm.
where the doorways for accidental exposures to things for kids who aren't even looking for it
Right.
are everywhere. There are browsers on everything, and everything is connected to our home network now and connected to the internet. And those are also the spots that I also want to make sure that parents are aware of. So not that answers your question specifically about the things that we're working on, but those are some of the ways that we just want to make sure parents aren't surprised by our very connected world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want them to grow complacent because, Chris, we listened to you. Delay is the way. You're right. We are waiting on social media.
Yeah.
Oh, but they haven't controlled their home network or all these other things. And those are the things that I also want them to get right. So.
Yeah. And that's a great reminder about thinking about all the different ways your child can connect to technology and the internet is a first step, really. I think we get really focused on social media and the phone device that we forget about all of that. But I think too, things change so much all the time. There's always new things coming up that parents need to learn about. And so I always recommend for parents to follow, if they're on Instagram, like follow your account at Protect Young Eyes, follow my account, follow these, and encourage your teenagers to as well. If you think it's appropriate, they should know about the evolving harms that are coming their way, and
absolutely,
and the newest tools that parents have too to help monitor everything. Right?
Yeah, I think some of the best ideas that we haven't even seen yet are going to come from some senior in high school, right?
Yeah.
I just was interviewed 2 nights ago by a group of 4 high school seniors who have this capstone project related to what they want to do is they want to start. It's very amazing. They want to do education for some of the younger kids around technology in their school. They're a K through 12 school, and so I'm gonna work with them, fly down there and work with them in order to help them do this. And they were just fascinated by this idea. And I was like, this is exactly what we need. We need an army of 17 and 18-year-olds who know what it's like, who are in it, and who can relate to some of these harms and these issues, and now can teach others, teach children and teach upward. One of the main things that I said to them was they were struggling with knowing whether or not they would be able to share anything pertinent with parents. Because they're like, well, we don't have kids, Chris. Like, we couldn't do a parent presentation at our school. And I said, that is not true.
Agree. Right.
Your parents have no idea for some of their children what their real digital experiences are. I think you have extremely valuable insights and information.
Yeah.
Because there are some ways in which it is beneficial to your life. And I want them to hear that, but I also want them to hear from your mouth, not from a news feed, not from X, which is all just bad, horrible, trending news, right? It's all the horrible things that are out there. And I think that just causes them to think that every 17-year-old that's holding a smartphone is doing something stupid. And that's just simply untrue.
Yeah.
So it was a great conversation. I'm excited to work with them because I think they have great power.
I love that. So tell listeners how they can connect with you and with Protect Young Eyes.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. You point people our way, which I really appreciate. We want to do really practical, explanatory things. If you want to know about the latest apps, and I know that you also have spoken to Bark and other places, right? These are organizations that I know do very similar things. We support and point to each other. As you said, there's a good, trusted list of organizations that I want parents to connect to. But you can follow us on social media. You can come to our website, Protect Young Eyes. We have a private community where we do provide that one-on-one assistance that is sometimes hard to find. It's hard for us to keep up with Instagram DMs. That's not a very scalable solution. conversation.
I know.
And Instagram doesn't always agree with all the things that we want to talk about. I've been put in Instagram jail, a couple times for that. But so we do have a community called The Table. We want parents to come around a table and have one-on-one and tech help kind of conversations. And we do that there.
Great.
So would love to help.
I'm surprised I haven't been put in Instagram jail. I don't think I have yet. And I talk about some pretty crazy things.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say.
I think they like that because I'm such a Snapchat hater and I talk a lot about Snapchat. So I think they're like, keep doing that on our platform.
Keep doing it. That's right. Absolutely. Yep. You're right.
Anyway, Chris, so thank you so much for taking time on a Friday afternoon to speak with me. Your insight and your resources at Protect Young Eyes are really invaluable to parents. I encourage listeners to visit protectyoungeyes.com, connect with Chris's team on social media for more insight. And again, Chris, I know we're going to stay connected, so let's continue the conversation as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Nikki. Take care.
Yeah.